It's off. Great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for attending. My name is David Tarpy. I'm the head of the North Carolina State University Apiculture program, or the honeybee specialist for cooperative extension in the state. And I'm really thrilled to be hosting this today. I'm going to be more in a moderating role than a presenting role because I don't pretend to be an expert in the field that we're going to be discussing today, but I am a huge proponent and really admire all of those that are working in this space. The title of this workshop is called AgriAbility, which is using kind of co-opting the greater term, the AgriAbility infrastructure that we have of trying to lower the bar, the barriers to entry and to usage of in different agricultural settings. And because apiculture is part of agriculture, just using the same terminology of the philosophy of trying to make things easier for those with disabilities to get into beekeeping and to make their practice of beekeeping better and more successful. Something like 20, depending on how kind of widely the definition is, but something like 20 to 25% of North Carolinians have some sort of disability, many of which you might not realize, overtly, but it can very much affect beekeeping and apiculture. And so we have a team of experts here where we're going to have a really excellent discussion talking about first the broader aspects of kind of health in agriculture. And for that, we have Catherine LePrevost and McKayla Robinette from the ag. Oh my gosh,
North
Catherine.
Carolina Agromedicine
Thank
Institute.
you. My goodness. Okay, I'm really glad that was recorded. But I'm going to have them t speak about the greater infrastructure of how apiability fits within that. And then after that, we're going to turn it over to Justin Sims, who runs a program very much within this area, and he's kind of the go-to person when it comes to these different issues. He gave a workshop at last summer's NCSBA conference that was really well attended and really vibrant and caused a lot of discussion. So we're really pleased to kind of capitalize on that and to continue that. Just little housekeeping things here. As you might notice, you don't have the ability to turn on your cameras or unmute yourselves. I am pleasantly surprised that we have dozens and dozens of people registered for this. But because of that, I didn't want to risk any Zoom bombing or anything like that. So we do, however, have the chat open if you want to communicate with me as the moderator. But if you have any questions for the speakers today, the Q&A thing is open as well. So please open that panel and type in any questions that you might have for the speakers. And then I will ask those on behalf after their presentations are over. Okay. So thanks again for joining, and I'm going to turn it over to Catherine.
Thanks so much, David, and thank you for making this connection between your apiculture program, Apiability, and the North Carolina Agromedicine Institute. I know Michaela and I are always excited when we get to talk to people about the Agromedicine Institute, and I feel like we've not done a lot of work reaching the beekeeping community up until this point, and it's something we're really excited about doing in the future. So thanks for the opportunity to share with you a little bit to get us started about the North Carolina Agromedicine Institute. So there are lots of so I'm an extension professor. I'm an agromedicine extension specialist in the same department with David, applied ecology at North Carolina State University. And another hat that I wear is that I'm the campus coordinator for the North Carolina Agromedicine Institute. The North Carolina Agri-Medicine Institute is a partnership among North Carolina State University, East Carolina University, and North Carolina A&T State University to promote the mission that you can see listed here, which is to advance the health of those in farming, forestry, and fishing, the people that they employ and their families as well, through research, prevention and intervention, and education and outreach. And so we're really excited to share with you some programs that we think might be of interest to you all based on your registration for this program, and to tell you a little bit about why we think that these programs are so important. I first started working with the agromedicine program back in 2007. So it's been a long time. And I started as a student working with Julia Storm, who's now long retired, but was focused on promoting agricultural safety and health within the state. And so I come from North Carolina. I'm from the western part of the state, Caldwell County, but before that, McDowell County. I think there was a McDowell County agent registered in here. And so I've really come up through the agromedicine program and realized what an important impact it can have on the lives of the people that we serve, and how those people that we serve really influence and shape our program as well. And so we're really excited to make this connection so we can think about how to make agromedicine even more useful to this group. Okay, Michaela, maybe the next slide for me, please. Oh, I was supposed to also tell you, Michaela told me that I was supposed to say that we are non-regulatory and non-advocacy at the Institute. So also, Michaela told me that she normally says that historically the Agromedicine Institute has worked on physical health and promoting physical health. And then I realized that I was the historically, which I guess with almost 19 years of experience, maybe I do fit into that realm. But Michaela has brought such great expertise to our program in expanding the Agromedicine Institute's focus from solely physical health to mental health as well. And we know about all the important interactions between physical and mental health. So in 2012, the Agromedicine Institute started incorporating mental health programming into its services. And then in 2018, started the Farm Ranch Stress Assistance Network. And so that is where we've really expanded our focus on emotional well-being and mental health for our state's agricultural workforce. And you can go on to, oh, and I think that this is a really helpful illustration of the ways that mental health and physical health, particularly as they relate to agriculture, go hand in hand. So that we know when we have farmers who are experiencing stress and fatigue, you also have an increase in farm incidents, including fatal incidents, which happen at a higher rate in farming than in other industries. And so this is why it's so important for us to be thinking about these mental health aspects as we're serving our farmers. And Michaela has some really great stories that she'll share with you about mental health. But I think that one thing that we notice from like a long-term data in agricultural safety and health is how dangerous the harvest time can be. And that has a lot to do with both incidents in fatigue and stress, and increase in incidents as a result. So I probably am not telling most of you anything that you don't know, that agriculture is a really important part of the economy in the state of North Carolina. We have an $111 billion impact on the state's economy, which is significant and important. But we also are one of the deadliest sectors. We have a very high rate of non-fatal and fatal injuries in agriculture. And so it's really important to us at the Institute to try to have our farming, forestry, and fishing workers and families be safe and healthy. And we know that in order to do that, we have to have programming that addresses both physical health and mental health as well. And so I'm going to turn it over now to McKayla Robinette. And McKayla is the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network Coordinator, but also does many things for the Agromedicine Institute. And it's going to tell you a little bit about some of the programs that we offer, that we think that you'll be interested in and hope that you might be willing to take advantage of. And McKayla will share contact information with you at the end, but please know that she and I are a resource to you as you're exploring these programs and this topic, as well as others relating to safety and health.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Catherine. And David, thank you and Justin, thank you for allowing us to be here today. So like Catherine mentioned, my name is McKayla Robinette, and I'm the Farm Stress Program Coordinator at the North Carolina Agromedicine Institute. So my work is largely focused in making sure that all of our producers and all of our growers across the state have the resources that you all need to be successful, not just in your operations, but also in your personal lives. We recognize that you are a lot more than what you do. Your relationships with your families, with your communities, with yourself are just as important. And so we do a lot to make sure that those things are fulfilled as well. A little bit about my background. So I grew up in Edgecombe County, North Carolina, on my family's beef cattle operation. And my connection with beekeeping is I've never been a beekeeper, but we raise grass-fed beef cattle, and so we have a lot of clover planted. And so we have a lot of partnerships with beekeepers around Edgecombe County. And I grew up with a lot of different hives on our operation, with folks that were looking for clover honey and looking to produce that. And so definitely have a fondness for you all, and I'm trying to find a date that I can start getting my beekeeper certification, because I'm envious of a lot of the things that you guys get to do. So just to share like what my part of this presentation is. So I'm going to continue what Catherine on Catherine's train, and share some of the programs that we have at the Agromedicine Institute right now that you all are more than eligible to apply for, and would love to have that conversation with you. And then following that, we're going to be doing a certification course for you all called Psychological First Aid, Listen, Protect, and Connect. This certification course, you all will receive a certificate via email at the end of this training. And it's essentially just goes through how to talk with people that may be having a hard time. And this can be, something as extreme as, after a traumatic incident or after a crisis on your operations. But it could also just be somebody that's having a bad day and having, not really knowing how to go about that. So that's our train of thought. If you have any questions or comments or want to engage with this conversation, please put it in the chat, because I am definitely a talker with people rather than to them. And so would love to keep that going as much as possible. So the first program that I just want to share with you all that we're offering right now is free CPR, AED, and first aid training. So we can come out to your county, to your operation, and certify you in CPR. And then anybody who participates in that CPR, AED, and first aid training is also then eligible to receive up to 5 first aid kits that are equipped for farm use per operation. And then anybody who participates as well is eligible to receive up to $2,000 for the reimbursement of purchasing an AED for your operation. We've actually been able to find AEDs that are less than $2,000. So it is very much so possible that the full cost of your AED would be reimbursed. If you are interested in receiving this training, or if you are a county agent and want to schedule a training for your county, please feel free to reach out to us. The phone number is on this flyer, and then we'll share it here in a second as well. But would love to work with you to set something up and get you CPR, first aid, and AED trained. And then going back to what Catherine mentioned earlier about, making sure that our programs really serve the folks that we work with. We want to make sure that, again, all of your needs, not just the ones on your operation, are fulfilled. So this caregiving mini grant program that we have going on right now is to help reimburse lost income and expenses that come from being a caregiver. So if you have had to take time off of of your operation, or if you have had undue expenses that have cut into your income, and you are a producer, if you are, a farmer, farm worker, or whatever your role is with beekeeping, then we are able to give up to $2,500 per family to offset those expenses. You can access this application on our website. So if you go to ncagromedicine.org, there will be a link here as well. That application is very, very short. Essentially, the cover page is your name, your address, and then check yes that you are a producer, check yes that you have caregiving expenses, and then you would just submit some documentation that says, this is what I'm going through. That can be a letter from a social worker, it can be a hospital bill, it can be a letter from an employer. We're not picky on what that documentation is. To answer Sean's question, is any of this materials available to out-of-state farmers not in North Carolina? No. So all of the programs that I will be sharing, that I have shared and will be sharing, are only for North Carolina producers. However, Sean, if you want to reach out to us, I'm happy to see, what state you're in and see if there's anything similar that would be available to you. So feel free to follow up with us. So yes, this caregiving program, it's available while funding lasts. So please get your application in quickly, so that way we can make sure that your application is reviewed. Similarly, this grant has a second component where we're able to cover the cost of any financial and legal services that you may be taking advantage of. So if you're meeting with a lawyer, if you're meeting with a CPA, or a financial consultant, anything like that, this flyer needs to be updated. We're able to provide up to $200 per session that you meet with them. So it's the same application as the caregiver grant. So a lot of people have been applying to both. So you can fill out one and send in that same information. For this, the only documentation that we need is either a paid receipt or an unpaid invoice that just says that you met with them. And I recommend that you get those itemized. So say that you met with them 4 times. So that way we know you receive up to $200 each time you've met with them instead of one lump sum. Again, this is available while funding lasts, so please get those in as soon as possible. The great thing about this grant is that it can be backdated to December 2024. December 2025, my bad, December 2025. So please get those in, and then we can get you guys situated for that as well.
McKayla, we had a question come in the Q&A, which I think we had anticipated, about how do we define a farm?
Yes, so that's a really great question. For these grants, if you self-identify as a farmer, then I do not ask questions. So we don't require a farm number. We don't require anything like that. So if you are an agricultural producer, then that qualifies.
And apiculture definitely falls under that broader umbrella, so that's great to know.
Yep. And then one of the last things that I just want to share with you all, again, this is another one that qualifies any agricultural producer, worker, or family member. So one of the programs that we have as part of the Farm Stress umbrella is we're able to cover the cost of mental health services for anybody that's involved in agriculture. So in order to take advantage of this program, you can either call us or you can go to our website and request services. So you just fill out a quick form that says like your name, your contact information, very, very short. And again, I don't ask questions. I don't need to know, what you're looking counseling for, anything like that. But from there, once you let us know that you're interested, I send you a list of providers that are across all of North Carolina. And you set up an appointment with that provider, and then that provider sends me the invoice. So you never see that what that invoice is. And we again don't request any personal information or billing information or insurance codes, anything like that. So it stays extremely confidential between you and that provider. So that's available to you. And again, would love to help you get set up with a counselor. If formal counseling is not necessarily something you're interested in, totally understand. We do have peer support programs as well available that we can connect you with somebody else that is going through the same things you are, that's in North Carolina, and would love to sit down and support you as you go throughout not only your roles as a grower, but again, as a person as well. And then the last thing that I just want to share, so we offer a lot of different mental health literacy trainings as a part of the Farm Stress umbrella. We're going to be doing psychological first aid today. But if this is something that you are interested in learning more about, how you can support your communities, your family members, your neighbors as they navigate the challenges that come with being in agriculture. We would love to get you certified in a couple and get you more education on how you can support those folks. So this is the schedule from now until May of trainings that are already scheduled. All of these are offered virtually at no cost. For the extension agents that are on this call, these trainings are also listed in XLMS. So you are more than welcome to sign up for them there, or you can go to that NC Farm Stress website and you can register online for any of these trainings as well. If a date doesn't work for you, but let's say your beekeeper group or your county wants to have a training set up just for you all, please reach out. I'm happy to schedule something that is specific for your group as well. And then this is our contact information. So again, you can reach us. I'll also put my email in the chat. But between this email and the agromedicine@ecu.edu or that phone number 252-744-1008, we can definitely get you connected to any of these resources. Are there any questions or comments before I segue into LPC training?
McKayla, while people are writing in, I did want to highlight one offering that you're giving next week, a week from today, for people who want to add on to the training that McKayla's providing. There's a mental health first aid training 1 week from today. So while this is fresh in your mind, if you'd like to go ahead and register with that, I think McKayla left the registration open through today or tomorrow, so folks
Tomorrow. Yep.
can go ahead and register for that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I completely forgot. So yes, so mental health first aid will be from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So it will be a full day next Thursday. But it will go through again how to help support somebody that's in mental health crisis. So covering anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and suicide and psychosis. So if you're interested in getting that certification, we would love to have you. For the agents on the call, you can register for that on XLMS. Or if you are a beekeeper, please go to that ncfarmstress.org and then go to the trainings tab and you can register in advance on that. Awesome. So I'm not seeing any questions come through. So we'll segue into psychological first aid. And let's see. So essentially how we will set up today's training, I just first of all want to thank, we couldn't do this work without our supporters. So very grateful for those individuals that have allowed us to provide this training to you at no cost. But the order of business for LPC training is we're going to talk about, what are some of the things that look like is terms of reactions to crisis and emergencies. What are the things that we would look out for in our communities? Recognizing who are the people at risk and who maybe need help and how to identify those people. We're going to go through a model of responding to folks that are in crisis as listen, protect, and connect, and talk a little bit about what each of those steps are. And then depending on time, which we might not have time, but I do have some scenarios if we want to practice those things as well. So when we talk about a crisis and emergency, if anybody wants to pop in the chat, I would love to hear, what are some of the things that you define as a crisis? And what are some examples of those things? And that can be, again, as beekeepers, it can be, as community members. What are some things that you think of as a crisis? Flash floods, absolutely. Forest fires, absolutely. And David and Justin and Catherine, if y'all are welcome to unmute as well.
Ice storms, since
Oh yeah.
pending.
Allison put it in the chat as well. Upcoming winter weather. I don't know about y'all's forecast. Mine says anywhere between 2 inches and 26, depending on when I check it. So we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Another really important one for us here in North Carolina, and especially for beekeepers, are hurricanes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, the top heavy beehives can, fall over, the lids can come off. Beekeepers often have their apiaries and riparian zones where it's usually a small trickle, but then during these mass flood events, it can be real problematic. So that's a major one for us here, beekeepers in North Carolina.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, David. So yeah, so in short, these are all great examples. But we think as the definition of a crisis for the purpose of this training as any situation or incident beyond or outside the scope of an individual's normal experiences. So these are things that interfere with somebody's ability to perform work duties either at the time of the incident or after. And so these are all great examples of things that interfere with our abilities to perform, either in work or in our personal lives. But again, outside the scope of somebody's normal experiences is really key here, because what may be a crisis to you might not be a crisis to me, depending on what our lived experiences are. I grew up very much so in flood zones, and we've had several 100-year floods back to back in our county. And so for me, a hurricane is just another day, right? But this winter weather that's coming up is, scary to me, but not necessarily maybe scary to somebody that is living in New England who's on this call that's used to -40 wind chills and all of these things. And so as we identify and talk about how to support people that may be experiencing an emergency or a traumatic event or a crisis, we always have to put their lived experiences into that context as well. So other examples of crisis or emergencies that we can talk about are dangers to ourselves or others. And my computer is having a moment, so 1 second, y'all. There we go. Can you still hear me? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so danger to ourselves or others, natural disasters like we talked about in the chat, human-made disasters, violent incidences, accidents, so motor vehicle accidents, injuries from machinery. If somebody has an incident on the farm or with the beehives, that can be something that we would consider as emergency, or a death or loss. And again, that doesn't have to be related to the farm. That can definitely be within the community, within your family. Those are things that we would think about. And so again, going back to that conversation of not everyone is going to be touched by crisis in the same way. Our lived experiences are different, and they're going to have us have different reactions. And so depending on when you find out about the crisis or your involvement in that, you could have, again, very different signs and symptoms. And so I love to encourage people just to know your people, know your community, recognize what's normal for them. So that way you can, again, have better outcomes in supporting folks. So when we're thinking of reactions to a crisis, what are some of the things that maybe you would expect to have after an emergency or that you would see in others? So I know for me, this is horrible, and my mom thinks I'm crazy, but I laugh a lot when I'm going through something really stressful or that I don't know what to do. And if I'm in an emergency. And so my mom definitely looks at me like I've grown 3 heads sometimes when I'm over here laughing, but that's an
Well,
example.
the classic response is flight, fight, or freeze,
Absolutely.
right? So, yeah, I can often freeze and not really able to process when something critical is going on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, Skylar in the chat said shocker being non-responsive. Absolutely. Yeah, so we think of other examples that fight, flight, or freeze being non-responsive, maybe inappropriate reaction. So again, like my laughing is probably considered inappropriate for a lot of people. But we also think of things like trouble sleeping. If somebody is either sleeping, and again, I think of these as a spectrum. You can be sleeping all of the time or not sleeping at all. You can have changes in your eating pattern. So maybe you are eating everything in sight. If you're a stress eater, this maybe resonates with you. Or you could have no appetite and not be eating anything. If there's any problems or unrest between your work or your school or your professional connections or your relationships with other people, you might be sad or quick to be irritable. You could have changes in how you listen and comprehend things. This can be known as like brain fog, where you maybe feel like you're walking through through mud. You're like, I'm not processing anything that's going on. Emotional changes or hypervigilance, where you're so ready for the shoe to drop that everything is something that you're paying attention to. And when we think about these reactions, they could happen immediately after, right? This could be something the incident happens and then suddenly you start feeling this way. But it's also important to note that these are things that can take weeks, months, sometimes even years to onset. So, after an incident, we don't just look for people, in the 24 hours following. We want to make sure that we continue to stay involved and stay in check with folks. And so when we talk about who's best situated to support people after a crisis, we definitely think of people like y'all on this call that are here, willing and able to learn how to best support each other, because ultimately the core of Listen, Protect, and Connect as a model is neighbors helping neighbors. So when we talk about psychological first aid, we really break this down into 3 components. Learn and listen to how we can best support somebody, help how we can, and then connecting people to the resources that are available to them. So when we talk about listening, this is, again, where I tell everybody, put your listening ears on. But essentially in this step, we're just trying to understand what it is that they went through, and understand how it's affecting them and what are the things that they need most in order to feel safe and secure following the event. So sometimes listening is fully verbal and making sure that we are listening to what they're saying verbally. But listening is also paying attention to their body language, to their processing, to how they're responding to the event non-verbally as well. So an example that I like to give here is that when we're trying to listen to the problem, sometimes it's not what they say, sometimes it's what they don't say. So let's use the example of a hurricane. So let's say a hurricane came through the community, and you're talking to your friend and their house was flooded. And that's a devastating thing to go through. Nobody wants to have that situation. And maybe your friend, you're having that conversation, you're talking to them about their house being flooded, and they make a comment that, yeah, my house is flooded, but I'll be okay. And they don't really talk about all of the things that come with that. So the immediate problem that they're telling you is that the house is flooded. But things that they're maybe not telling you is now they don't have a place to sleep tonight, or they may not know where their next meal is coming from, or all of their important documentation, their insurance, their personal documents, all of those things might not be accessible that they need in order to start the rebuilding process. And so it's making those initial connections, but then it's thinking about all of the things that can come out of a result of that. So when you are listening, I definitely recommend that you prioritize concerns based on what they need the most, but then also focusing on how you can help in that immediate moment. Going back to your friend's home being flooded, you may not be in a position that you can say, come stay in my house. I'll make sure that I'll shack you up until you can get a new place to live, all of these things. But you could say, hey, I have a shop vac, you can borrow that and help with the cleanup. Or, I'm happy here's a gift card to a restaurant, go out and get yourself a hot meal. Figuring out the ways that you can support people that works for you. When you're in this listening step too, it's okay to have moments of silence. I know for a lot of us, there can be a lot of eagerness to respond and to fill gaps in conversation because we think that's what we need to do. But sometimes people just need to sit in silence. If you've ever had a hard conversation with somebody, you might remember a time that sitting in that silence has almost made the conversation more impactful because the person that you're speaking with, or maybe you as you're having a conversation, have been able to reflect on what you've said and what you feel like you need to say next. So I encourage you, if you're talking with somebody who's having a difficult conversation, maybe count to 30 in your head before you respond. Give yourself 30 seconds to let that individual process the words that they just said and make sure that you've processed everything that you need in order to respond in a way that's appropriate and reflective of what they actually need to hear, and not just saying things to fill silence. Also encourage them that there's no right or wrong way to feel. Again, going back to what are their past lived experiences. If they've gone through a hurricane before, they've dealt with flooding before, this might just be an old hat. And it's frustrating, but it's not scary in the same way. But likewise, or opposite, they could have never had this experience before and they don't know what to do. And so there's no right or wrong way to process a traumatic event. You also want to just be sure that you are keeping an eye on them for those prolonged reactions or reactions that can come later. This isn't like always a one and done conversation. You might have to check back in and make sure that the needs have not evolved since the last time you spoke. So once you have listened to the problem and you feel like you have a grasp of understanding, we then move into the stage that we call protect. So in the protect frame of the conversation that you're having, this is where we're really just trying to make sure that they have the resources that they need to bounce back. And determining how we can help. So listen and protect very much so like slide into each other. But we're providing that encouragement that, hey, like things might not be great right now, but it's not forever, and you're going to get better. So when we're protecting and when we're in this step, we're really thinking about the things that we need to do in order, again, to help them get better quickly. So we're looking at filling basic needs first. So going back to our example with somebody's house that was flooded, we need to make sure they have food and water and shelter, clothing, pet food, and other basic needs. So how many of you all have seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs before? Maybe a few of you that have been through the block. Basic Psychology 101. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is this concept that until our most basic base level needs are met, we cannot feel confident and comfortable moving throughout the world with any sort of relationships, any personal growth, any self-reflection, these more like higher level experiences that we have as people. So when we're talking about LPC and talking about how to support people in crisis, our immediate attention should be on these physiological and these safety needs, making sure they have a clean place to sleep, making sure they have access to food, clothing, and making sure that they feel safe and secure in the space that they are in. And so an example of this, going back to our house being flooded, until they have clean clothes, have been able to shower, have been able to get a good night's rest, they may not feel confident and comfortable going to the bank and asking for a loan to rebuild their home, right? So we need to make sure that those basic needs are met before we move on. Other actions that might be taken in this step is any immediate, especially in the case of an immediately responding to a traumatic event, maybe you're on the scene as it's happening. Is any first aid or CPR required? Going back to, you have to take care of the immediate things first. If somebody has been hurt, you need to take care of those things. You also would offer empathy and support as you're having that conversation with somebody. So making sure that they know that they're loved and that they're cared for and that they have people on their side and they're not sitting on an island can be really helpful to people that might not feel that there's a direction. The other thing that I really encourage everybody, if you feel confident in this conversation, is you might be asked questions about what happened. And so if you feel like you know the answer those questions, provide clarity. We saw this a lot after Hurricane Helene, when individuals maybe were stranded in their communities and couldn't get access to the news or to know what was going on. Whenever they finally got connected with other people, it's, what do you know? What have you heard? Where are the staging sites? What's happening? If you know the answer, providing that clarity can go a long ways, again, in helping people feel confident and secure as they try to fit the pieces together. However, if you don't know the answers, don't lie to them, or don't say things that you don't know are truth, because it would just contribute to that feelings of unsettledness. And so lastly, with this step too, it's always great to remind people how they've handled challenges in the past, and ask them what worked for them. So going back to somebody who just went through a hurricane, if they've been through one, they've probably been through them before. And so asking them, what are the things that you did the last time this happened? What are the steps that you took? Who are the people that you called? Who are your neighbors that were in the path and that you maybe need to check on and that you've done before? What do you need to do now? And so another piece that is helpful is maybe you sit down with them and you develop a safety plan. A lot of times immediately following a crisis or an event, we go, oh my gosh, I wish I had this information. Or, man, if only I had this written down, I wouldn't be struggling. And so sometimes it's immediately after the event, that's the best time for you to start writing those information down. And so we have a farm emergency plan template that we've developed in partnership with the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Sciences. It's available for download on our website. You can also Google this, the farm emergency plan template. And so if you haven't seen this before, I highly encourage you to fill one out, at least get it started, because it's great to have, and you never know when a situation will take place, and you never know when you might be in a position to share this resource with somebody else. So as I wrap up, the last step, once we've listened to the problem, we've figured out what resources are best needed, we then move on into connecting them directly to that resource. So one of the things that I will be emailing to you all is a copy of other resources that may be available for folks in agriculture. So this is the North Carolina Agromedicine Institute's Farm and Ranch Resource Directory. And then also resources directly related to Listen, Protect, and Connect. But definitely, you always have to keep in mind what are the local resources that are available to you all? What are things that come out of a crisis that might be beneficial to the people that you work with? So always feel free to be looking at all of these things. And thanks, Catherine, for putting that link in the chat. So when you are connecting them with resources too, some of that may be helping them locate and communicate with loved ones. So after Hurricane Helene, for example, NC 211 was doing a lot of this work where you could call that phone number and say, hey, I haven't heard from my mom. This is her name. This is her address. And they would help provide that facilitation. So that might be something that you're asked to do. You also want to encourage social supports as much as possible, recommending to them church groups or community organizations that can provide support to them, as well as other systems of care that might be beneficial. And so with that, I think we will end it here in terms of LPC, but congratulations, you all have participated in this training. I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any guidance or feedback. As mentioned in the chat, because you participated in this training, I will be emailing you all the resources as well as a blank certificate. So you just fill out your name on that, that you can use for any of those resources as well. But thank you all so much for allowing us to be here, and I will turn it back over to you, David.
Great, thanks so much, Michaela. And you were answering questions and both in the chat and in the Q&A, both you and Catherine for doing that. But thanks so much for the work that you do at the Agromedicine Institute and that overview. I think I wish we would have been able to put this together before Helene, because I know a lot of beekeepers in Western North Carolina were very much affected by that. The community came together just in a really wonderful way, but you already have a lot of these resources there, and it would have been great to have been able to draw on that. I'll continue to keep an eye on the Q&A and the chat for any other questions that might come up. But thank you again for that overview and all the great things that you guys are doing. I guess I'll then go ahead and turn it over to Justin Sims, who is the founder and the lead of Accessible Beekeeping. I'll put the link to his website in the chat. Beat him to it, which I'm sure he was going to do. He's a beekeeper in Virginia, but he has done just an amazing amount of work in this space specific to beekeeping and accessibility. And he has gotten USDA grants to help develop an infrastructure around all of this. He has a research apiary or experimental apiary of trying different hive designs and these kind of things. He even has an AI app to be able to possibly read frames so that those with visual impairments might be able to get a better understanding of what's going on inside a colony. He just has a heck of a lot of stuff going on. And so I'll just turn it over to him and thank you for presenting, Justin.
Thank you for having me. It's going to be a tough job following that amazing talk that they both did. So I appreciate everything. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Um, sorry. So I know David just sent out um, the URL for the website. The purpose of this discussion came out of SARE grant. SARE is the Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education. So if you go to the website and click on the SARE, you can see some information about it. I think this was the workshop talk that I did actually with David in North Carolina. And then we also have a living beekeeping manual here, which kind of goes more in depth into everything that I'm going to talk about today. Um, so we will go ahead and jump into that. So let me, sorry, technical difficulties. You would think somebody that could write an app could use PowerPoint and Zoom. Okay. So the talk that I'm going to give today is thinking outside the box. It is my goal is to ensure that beekeeping is accessible to individuals of all abilities. So kind of what we're going to go over today is um, the history of accessible beekeeping, current beekeeping system technology, accessible apiary design, first aid and emergency response plans, current availability of accessibility in the beekeeping community, and last, the reason that this whole SARE grant came up was actually to for professional development. So it was built to train the trainers essentially to be able to come out into their citizens in their area, into their farms and their agricultural enterprises, and actually give feedback and assessments and kind of guide people who would like to get into beekeeping, a way to get started. So we're going to talk a little bit about introduction to accessible beekeeping. I don't want to assume that everyone here is a beekeeper, and I also don't want to assume that you guys know nothing about beekeeping. So this is kind of keep it sweet and to the point, and kind of guide you along a little bit of the intro to accessible beekeeping, and then we can go deeper into what extension agents and what you can do to help those in your local bee clubs or your state organizations and things like that. So, for those of you who are not beekeepers, some of the key aspects of beekeeping that everyone talks about is pollination services. Honeybees contribute significantly to crop production, and that ensures higher yields and biodiversity. There are commercial beekeepers that actually take truckloads of bees to California and different places during different harvest periods pollination periods, to be able to sustain the agriculture that we have here in the United States. Honey and beeswax production, beekeepers harvest these valuable resources for food, cosmetics, and medicinal uses. And then colony management is, how do we maintain healthy colonies, and what knowledge does it require of bee behavior, environmental factors, and disease prevention? So, for those that do not know the history of beekeeping, here's a few points that I like to highlight. Is in early depictions of honey gathering was found in prehistoric rock art in Spain. Then we moved to ancient Egypt. Egyptians actually documented beekeeping in tomb paintings and hieroglyphs, using cylindrical clay hives and early honey collection techniques. Moving a little further along, the Greek and Roman innovations was that they introduced woven basket hives coated with clay to better insulate, and medieval Europe popularized skep hives made of woven straw, and that required colony deconstruction for the honey extraction. So the evolution of designs is when ancient hives, it went from like cylindrical clay hives to woven baskets to the skep hives that we just talked about in medieval Europe. In 1851, we went to movable frames where Dr. Langstroth actually designed the hive that is most used today in commercial beekeeping. In 1910, the Slovenian AZ hive was um, was designed, and then they also have top bar hives and flow hives. Modern innovations, we have new hive systems being developed for accessible beekeeping, ergonomic tools and hive lifters, electric honey extractors. So, as a whole, in an industry, we are moving towards being more accessible for uh, to be more accessible. Sorry. So, a couple of notes that I want to make about the history of accessible beekeeping is Francois Hubert and beekeeping as a vocation for disabled veterans in World War One. So, the earliest known example of accessible beekeeping is actually Francois Hubert. He was a Swiss naturalist and beekeeper who was blind. He developed the leaf hive, which is also known as the Hubert hive. And the way that he did his inspections was he relied on his wife and assistant, Francois Burnens, to document observation. And some of the key discoveries that he made, and it's amazing to think that he was blind while he made these with his wife and assistant, is the role of the queen bee, the patterns for swarming, and then the organization within the hive. The second thing is beekeeping as a vocation for disabled veterans of World War One. It was really cool to see that the United States actually put this manual out, and I believe I have it on my website that you can read and look at. But it was introduced as a vocational rehabilitation program for disabled veterans returning from World War One with shell shock. And what the program actually did was trained veterans in hive management, honey production, and pollination services. And the reason this was so vital was because during World War One, when we had to ration a lot of the resources that the United States citizens had, um, byproducts of beekeeping was actually something that sustained the war more than most people talk about, because honey was used as a natural sweetener, and the wax was used to actually coat the tanks and the metals while they were in war to prevent them from rust and damage. So this set the foundation for the recognition of beekeeping as an accessible agricultural trade for individuals with disabilities and limitations, and something that is possible for everyone to participate in. So the history, early humans engaged in hive hunting, cave paintings found in Spain. Egyptians considered honey a sacred substance, so it was used like we do today for food, medicine, religious offerings. In Greek mythology, honey was known as ambrosia, or the food of the gods. And the amount of knowledge that we have of honeybees has advanced exponentially in modern times through research of different people, such as Dr. Tarpy, and everything that him and North Carolina State and agriculture has done, across the United States and world. So to overview accessible hive systems, the Slovenian AZ hive was designed for ease of access. The Langstroth was designed to reduce heavy lifting by placing hives horizontally instead of vertically. And, and if you are not familiar with what Langstroth is, it's actually multiple boxes stacked on top of each other. And in order to get to what we call, what beekeepers call the brood, where the queen lays the eggs and the baby bees are born and everything is um, in the bottom two boxes. And when it comes time to harvest the honey, you actually put things called or boxes called supers that the queens do not lay in on top. But in order to do your hive inspection, you would have to take those supers off every time you do an inspection, put them back on. Um, Langstroth boxes can be anywhere from 60 to 100 pounds when full. So, the long Langstroth said, hey, let's take what we have and use in the same space and design. And instead of going vertical, let's go horizontal. The top bar hive, similar design. It goes horizontally rather than, vertical. And then we have some, assistive technology such as hive lifters, ergonomic protective gear, voice activated record keeping tools. And it seems like, every year something new is coming out that makes the job of a beekeeper just a little bit easier. Um, for those of you who do not know about honeybees, just to give you a quick biology of them, we're going to talk about the colony structure, roles, the superorganism concept, which kind of goes back to what the talk that we had previously goes on to, everybody helping everybody and having that uh, conjoined communication and adaptation. So if you do not know beekeeping and you're here as an extension agent and you have not been familiar with it, colony structure and roles, queen bee is the sole reproductive female and she can lay up to 2,000 eggs per day. She is also regulates colony behavior through pheromones, so she can actually communicate with the worker bees based on her pheromones and what she puts off. The worker bees are the ones that perform various roles depending on age. So the nurses feed larvae and care for the queen. The foragers collect nectar, pollen, and water. And the guards, they defend the hive from predators. The cool thing about this is from the time that they are born to the time that they perish, they move through this role as they get bigger, they start here, then they go to guards, then they go to foragers, and foragers is usually the last role that they have because they may perish on the way back. Drones are male bees whose primary role is mating with the queen. During the winter, the resources that honeybees have they do not have enough to care for the drones because the drones are lazy and they're only there for mating. They don't have any other role, so they're actually expelled from the hive before winter so that the hive as a whole can survive. So, what is the super organism concept? It is colony level decision making. So, worker bees use feedback mechanisms to regulate food collection, defend the colony, rear the brood. They talk about resource allocation. So, bees distribute tasks dynamically by age and colony needs. And then defense and health maintenance. They also engage in social immunity to groom, use propolis and hygienic behavior, like cleaning each other off, which helps delay disease spread. What are some of the ways that bees actually communicate? They do a waggle dance. They can communicate a food source location through precise movements to another forager. We've already mentioned pheromones, which are chemical signals that regulate task allocation, colony defense, and reproductive suppression. The thermoregulation, bees cluster together in cold weather for warmth and fan their wings in hot weather to cool the hive. So one of the things that's important is an extension agent or somebody in the beekeeping club that has a person with limitations that might want to get into beekeeping is to understand safety. So you need to talk about, essential protective equipment. How do you manage when a colony becomes aggressive? Um, Aggression from a colony can be for any reason. It could be too windy, too cold, could aggravate them just by opening it up too fast, letting too much light in. They actually use propolis to seal the hive and regulate temperature and everything in light and all inside. So anytime that you open the hive up, you're actually disrupting the hive as a whole. So that can cause aggression as well. You want to talk about allergy precautions and then safety in when used in an accessible apiary. So what are some of the essential protective equipment? We have bee suits, we have gloves, a veil and hat, and then boots. Some of the things that you can tell your constituents that you're helping is, if they wear boots, tuck their pant legs inside socks. Make sure that the bees have as little access to your skin as possible. Um, the, the bee suits, they can be full body, but when you have somebody with limitations, disabilities, and things like that, you want to think about their ability for their body to regulate temperature. So sometimes a full bodysuit can actually cause overheating, heat strokes. So it might be that they need the jacket and wear a pair of jeans or something like that. So you have to think about, you know, not just let's protect them from the bees and getting stung. You also have to think about like what we put on them or what we put around them. How does that affect their success in beekeeping? So some of the ways that beekeepers manage colony aggression is they use a smoker. The purpose of the smoker is that it actually disrupts pheromone communication. This is not like, a heavy smoke. It's like a light misting, just to disrupt the communication between the queen and the worker bees. It uses dry natural materials are best to produce a cool, long-lasting smoke. So once you heat the smoker, you don't want it to be, burning hot. It's like a cool smoke, and you just want like the smoky smell, not so much the heat. Um, Before opening it, you apply a light smoke at the hive entrance and under the lid. So this kind of puts it, when you do it at the entrance, it goes, the smoke rises, it'll go into the hive and all the way through. And then during inspection, you can use it to, move them off of a frame or, use a turkey feather to, kind of brush them out of the way. Another option that beekeepers use is sugar water spray. So they can do a light misting with a 1-to-1 ratio sugar water. It's a good alternative to smoke. Like we said, the superorganism concept and hygiene, when you spray them with the sugar water, they spend more time cleaning each other off and it makes their wings wet. So it kind of calms them down and focuses on the hive and the other bees around them. So some of the things that you have to think about is, when you're going out to meet with a constituent or a citizen, or you're having them come to your apiary, if you're not a beekeeper, you want to think about optimal weather, moving gently and slowly, wearing the proper protective gear, minimize hive disruptions, inspect during the midday. You don't want to during the midday is when most of the foragers are gone, so there's less bees inside the actual hive when you go into it. But then you want to think about, when doing inspections in the summer, what is the temperature outside for somebody that, that is wearing a full bee suit and can they, like, again, handle that heat level? And then you want to make sure that they stay calm and confident. You don't force them into doing anything. Sometimes if you want to bring somebody out to your apiary, just have them sit by it and watch you do the inspection. This, some people will be excited to jump right in, others are hesitant. So, you got to gauge the comfort level of the person that you're working with. For allergy precautions, which is one of the more serious things to worry about when working with bees, is, recognize the symptoms. Is it mild? Is it just redness, swelling, from a bug bite or, bee sting? Or is it severe, difficulty breathing, dizziness, and swelling on the throat? You should carry emergency medication. If they do have known allergies, have them bring their EpiPen. And then an immediate response to stings is remove the stinger quickly by scraping. You don't actually want to pinch and pull because you can push more of the venom into you. You want to actually take like a hive tool or a fingernail and actually scrape the stinger out. Apply ice to reduce swelling and then seek medical attention, if severe symptoms occur. This is one of the things you have to be careful about is if they do not know if they are allergic to bees, you have to think about your first aid and how far you are from emergency care in that situation. So how can you make an accessible apiary safer? You can think about hive placement, making pathways accessible, what equipment can be modified, seated beekeeping hive systems, what adaptive protective gear is there, and then, as I just mentioned, emergency preparedness. So in apiary management, there's parts of the hives, hive inspections, record keeping. We won't go through all of that, but um, the hive itself, there's the brood box, which is the bottom two, or where the queen actually lays her eggs. There's the supers, the honey, the queens do not lay eggs in the supers, and that's where the honey is actually processed, capped, and then beekeepers pull the honey from the supers. The wax is put in between things called frames and the bottom board, inner and outer cover. So these are all parts of what an actual beehive, looks like. And there are, plenty of YouTube videos out there about like looking at it if you want to see it before you go out or, um, so hive inspections, this is a short, sweet, step-by-step guide. The training manual has a little bit more in-depth information in it. So you want to plan your inspections, determine frequency, gather your tools, and then plan by weather. As I mentioned before, weather can increase or decrease the amount of colony aggression that you deal with. Um, Determining frequency, that is, if it's a newer hive, you might want to go in there more frequent to be able to, make sure the comb is being put where it is, the bee space is like it's supposed to be. But then if it's an established hive, you might not need to go in as often towards the end of the summer while you're actually doing, um, pulling the honey supers and harvesting honey. So one of the inspection process, you remove first you get a smoker and kind of give it a start. You remove the lid and the outer cover. You lift the frames one by one, looking for a presence of a queen, healthy brood patterns. Do they have sufficient food? Because anytime that you take honey from them, you are taking their food. So you want to make sure that during the winter, you don't take more than they need to survive during the winter. And then do you see any signs of pests or disease? How do you determine if you cannot see the queen? You need to make sure that you determine if there is a queen right hive. And what a queen right hive is a colony with a healthy and productive queen. You want to make sure that the brood chamber and layout is basics. Make sure the brood is well organized. It's not patchy. It's not all over the place. You want to think about the honey super, only place supers when the brood chamber is 80% full. And basically what that general rule is you start with a single box, we say 10 frames. You don't add a second box until there are 8 frames full at minimum. And then you can give them, because you don't want to give them too much space or not give them enough space. So there's a kind of a science between when to add more boxes. But some beekeepers swear by using a single brood, which is 1 box, or a double brood, which is 2. So you can, whether you do a single or double, do your research on actual beekeeping before you make those decisions. But once both those boxes, let's say you do 2, both those boxes are 80% full, then you can look into actually placing on honey supers. And then you want to make sure when you pull the honey super again that there's ample food stores. It's important for record keeping you can do some record keeping like hive health observations, record the queen status. Beekeepers will actually put color paint on the back of the queens that coordinate to the year. And then you can know that if you have a yellow dot on the queen, then you had that queen that year. But then if you have a queen with no dot, then you know that your queen had passed away and you now have a new queen that the colony has reared. Um, Pest and disease monitoring, document any findings, keep track of honey stores. There are actually applications out that's like Hive Tracks and different phone apps that you can use to make documents and notes. This is especially important with accessible beekeeping because you're dealing with people that um, might have limitations in memory or attention. Especially not even limitations. There might be a new beekeeper that's coming out, and there's so much going on that they might not remember. Everyone's going to remember when they see the queen because it stands out. But you want to kind of keep record keeping, not just so you can refer to it next year, but you can also refer to it in 2 to 4 weeks when you decide to do your next um inspection. When you get into a multi-year colony, it's nice to be able to look back and look at environmental factors like what was the weather, temperature conditions, and plants around when you went into the hive, and then you can compare it to, clover bloomed late this year, but it was prominent when I looked in the last time. That might be why my colony is not producing as much honey at this time of the year. So it kind of helps you see like what might be why your colony is struggling to produce like it did the year before, or even starting to produce more than it was. Some of the common pests and pathogens are, varroa mites, wax moths, small hive beetles, American foul brood, nosema. So these are some of the pests and pathogens that beekeepers in the United States are dealing with. They each have their own method of treatment, and I am not the best at speaking on how to treat for pests and stuff. So that would be something to, do more research on. And I just want to remind you that this is not like a end all be all on how to be a beekeeper. There are many schools of thoughts, many trains of thought. So, you know, do your due diligence, research everything you learn. Ask yourself like, what is, 3 things I liked? What is 2 things that I have questions about? And what is one that I might apply? So it kind of keeps you moving forward in how to research about taking on like an agricultural enterprise such as beekeeping. So current beekeeping systems technology, Brian Brian Wentz at the University of Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, actually did this paper exploratory data on U.S. beekeepers with disabilities with me. We did it 2 years ago, and one of the things that we found that in the United States, from the 512 responders that we had to our survey, about 53% of them said that they had some kind of limitation that made beekeeping difficult. And those responders were people that wanted to beekeep but were hesitant, current beekeepers, beekeepers that did not have a disability and due to an injury, had obtained one. So we're going to go through, accessible hive bodies, apiary design, and things like that. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. So Dr. Brian Wentz and I did this paper in 2023. If you would like to read it, it's on our website. So you can go to our website or scan the QR code. Don't hesitate to reach out in my email or anything and ask, anything you want to ask about beekeeping. I'm always interested in to point you in the right direction if I can, or find out information that I don't know. And it also helps the living manual grow and be more beneficial because there are some disabilities that I didn't think about, some limitations that skip my mind. So it always, anytime someone asks a question, I try to update that document and with the information that I've gathered or given, and then it will keep growing as more and more people will get into beekeeping. So we've already talked a little bit about this, the flow hives, honey extraction aids. There's definitely a need for development of new aids, and one of the things that I do with accessible beekeeping is, try to partner with engineering schools and engineering departments at universities to get the to get the master students, bachelor's students to actually possibly design assistive technology for beekeepers as part of their senior projects. So one of them was a frame holder out of Purdue. So, there's always desire to develop more. There is a National AgriAbility actually has a toolbox that you can go to, and you can see if there is more tools that you can utilize. And sometimes they have actually how to manually build it yourself, because one of the issues that we have with assistive technology, whether it's agriculture or beekeeping or just regular life, is the cost of it. So the hive bodies that we're going to talk about are the Langstroth, Slovenian AZ, the long lang, the top bar hive, and then the flow hive. So the Langstroth hive has pros and cons, just like every hive system that we're going to mention today. Um, when Dr. Langstroth came out with this design, it standardized equipment and widely made parts widely available. It's easy to expand your hive by adding more supers. And then the frames use a thing called bee space that helps prevent excessive cross combing and actually makes hive inspections easier. The con, as we mentioned, for somebody with a limitation in lifting or dexterity is how heavy it is when stacking and unstacking boxes. And then due to the contained size, you might need regular inspections to prevent swarming so that they don't outgrow the hive. This lung stress hives are best for beekeepers with mild mobility issues or mild back pain who can still lift moderate weights but need a structured and standardized hive system. These hive systems are physically demanding but produce lots of honey and other byproducts that beekeepers can utilize, which is why it's very popular in commercial beekeeping. The Slovenian AZ hive, the pros that it has, there's no heavy lifting. The frames are accessed, as you can see in the picture from the back. It is great for indoor or shed-based beekeeping. So in Slovenia, they actually have a shed, and they build these hives that the wall of the shed is actually the front of the hive, and the beekeeper can go into the hive out of the elements and actually do the inspection. It's protected from harsh weather when you due to the enclosed design. There's less ventilation, and then there's it's more difficult to find in certain markets. It also is a very static hive. You don't move it a lot. Langstroth, you can wrap up the hive at night and move it to a different property. These hives, some of the things about the AZ hives, the hives that are accessible, they're a lot harder to move to different locations. So when you think about, is that person going to be in that their house for a year? Or are they planning on moving? It might be better to postpone some of these accessible options until they're somewhere that they could possibly be for an extended period of time. The Slovenian AZ hive is best for beekeepers with limited mobility, wheelchair users, or individuals with chronic back pain, as it allows inspections without bending or lifting heavy boxes. The long lane hive. This is a long lane. This is actually one that was built for me by a company in North Carolina that I think has since been sold to somebody in Washington. But the pros of the long lane is usually it doesn't sit like this. This is one of the first ones on the market that he actually built that tilted forward me to me so that I could pull it with a wheelchair and do my inspections and then lower it back flat when I was done. There's no heavy lifting of boxes. It uses the standard Langstroth frames, which means any beekeeping store that you go into, you just, I need a pack of frames, you go buy it and you can use them. It provides easy access to all frames without having to disassemble the hive and lift, the top box off to get to the bottom. It requires more ground space, so there's less that you can have inside your apiary. And then expansion is limited compared to stacked hives. Stacked hives, you can go as tall as you feel comfortable. In horizontal hive, you have a fixed number of frames, and it might be more inspections to pull frames that are finished out. Um, sorry, pull the super frames out more frequently to replace them rather than entire boxes. What is the long lane good for? It is good for beekeepers with limited upper body strength, arthritis, or joint pain, as it eliminates the need to lift those heavy boxes. Top bar hive is a similar hive to the long lane in that it is longer than it is tall. It's minimal equipment required. There's no need for pre-made frames. It promotes natural comb building behavior. So if you've ever seen comb in the wild, it's not it's not actually like a square box. It's more curved at the bottom, more like conish, and it reduces back strain as there's no heavy lifting. The cons is it's more prone to cross combing if you don't properly space out each of the bars, and it is a little more difficult for some beekeepers with limited dexterity because you have to be very careful in the way that you manipulate the bar because the frame itself does not actually, or the comb itself is actually hanging free rather than encased in on all four sides. This is best for beekeepers with limited grip strength, arthritis, or joint pain for the same reason that the other two hives, it's the other two hives. The flow hive, there's a lot of discussion about whether this is good or bad for beekeeping. For accessible beekeeping, it's great. You can do your hives. It's still a Langstroth system, but instead of having to carry heavy boxes of honey from the apiary back to your shed or wherever, you were actually able to harvest the honey from the right from the hive. So what it provided was minimal disruptions to the bees when harvesting honey. It was efficient and time saving. It was good for beginner beekeepers. The con was it was more expensive than traditional hives, and the plastic components of it may degrade. And then one of the controversies is people thought that once you got the super on there, you just forgot about the brood and at the bottom. And it's very important to understand that you still have to maintain the bees, even if the actual super extraction is difficult. So this is the flow hive is best for beekeepers with hand tremors, arthritis, or mobility limitations for honey extraction because it does allow it with minimal effort compared to actual Langstroth. Because it is still a Langstroth, you would need a partner or somebody that can help with the heavy lifting in that sense. So we're gonna look at some of the information about hive types. So the Langstroth hive is the three types of, sorry, let me backpedal. The three types of beekeeping that we kind of use in the industry is hobbyist, sideliner, and commercial. So hobbyist is, one or two hives, you're just doing it in your backyard for your garden. Sideliner is, I think it's 5 to 10. And then a commercial is obviously, you know, way up there. Um, so the Langstroth, when it comes to each of these three, specific is a best choice for a hobbyist with no limitations because it does give you the cheaper entry into it, has more availability to actually get new parts if something breaks or you want to grow your apiary. It's common in sideliner and it's the industry standard. It's a note about it is the most widely used hive for all levels of beekeeping due to its modular design, scalability, and high honey production. The Slovenian AZ is great for small scale. So where, if you want to think about, you know, 25 to 50 hives, like some of the sideliner and the high end of the sideliner commercial beekeepers, Slovenia would not be a good choice for you because of the restrictions that it has. Sideliner, would have a limited use, but for commercial, it's not practical. A lot of the accessible options are not very practical for commercial beekeeping. But what is the Slovenia ideal for? It's ideal for hobbyists or those with mobility limitations. They just have to understand that it's less scalable for larger operations. So instead of going from I'm going to produce, gallons and gallons and gallons of honey, it might be I'm going to use this to produce wax or, you know, oils and stuff like that. So there still used to be in a commercial sense with some of these accessible apiaries. You just have to think about what your niche is in beekeeping. For the hobbyist, the long laying is a great option or a good option. It's possible but less common for a sideliner, and it's very inefficient for a commercial due to the amount of movement, honeybees, and everything. So it works well for backyard beekeepers, but it's harder to scale for larger operations due to its horizontal layout. Top bar hive is very popular with natural beekeepers. It's not ideal for scaling, again, for either sideliner or commercial. And it is best for hobbyists interested in low intervention beekeeping, but unsuitable for large honey production. And then last but not least, the flow hive is very popular with hobbyists, some use with sideliners, and again, not very practical for commercial because it is easy for hobbyists, but the flow frames are expensive and less practical for commercial beekeepers. So the hive suitability, each hive type is better suited for different levels of beekeeping. So as we just talked about, best for hobbyists, Langstroth, Slovenia, basically any type of hive you want to use for your personal self. Langstroth is best for sideliner and commercial beekeeping, and it is why it is the industry standard. So when you actually have when you actually go out and you meet with somebody and you want to help them design an accessible apiary, you want to think about location. I know, everyone always jokes location, location, location. This is definitely one that fits that spiel. Um, you want a flat and stable terrain. You want it sheltered from extreme weather, so you can get a clearing with trees around it, but still has enough sunlight. That might be a better place for an accessible apiary. And then you want to have easy access to a water source, because if there's not a water source around, then you have to provide the water source, and that might not be easier for somebody who has limitations. Think about hive placement, use raised hive stands, side opening hives like Savannah. And then the biggest one for accessible apiaries, you want wide, clear pathways between the hives. Some of these commercial operations, you'll go out and you'll see many hives, compact in one place. And that's easy for somebody that has no issues walking, no balance issues, things like that. But you want to make sure that if you have somebody with a wheelchair coming out, that they have at least, I think a wheelchair is 26 inches wide. They should be able to roll through the hive rows and turn around if they need to without worrying about knocking over any of the hives. Persons with disabilities may not always show that they are struggling. So the best way to be preventative is to plan and don't react. Due to limitations, injuries can occur from the simplest tasks. This could be something as simple as, walking out to the apiary or lifting one of the hive boxes. So the best way to reduce risk is always the buddy system, protective clothing and gear, modify your apiary for safety, and then keep emergency contacts handy and updated. You also want to think about, when you go back to location, is can the first responders easily access this location? And more than likely, if a wheelchair user can access it, then the first responders will probably be able to access it. Um, Dependent on the type of wheelchair the user has. You want to keep a first aid kit that is up to date. So what do you do in an emergency? If it's anaphylaxis and they start to have trouble breathing, you call 911, you use the EpiPen, and then you can perform the CPR that you can learn from, the Michaela and Catherine. If it's a fall or injury, assess the injury. If it's serious, do not move them. That can make things worse. As extension agents, I'm sure you're well aware of the first aid, response stuff. Call 911 if necessary. Apply pressure, keep elevated. One of the things that after my stroke, that I had issues with is heat exhaustion. So, move to shade or cool area immediately. Make sure they have maybe a stool or something they can sit down on. Have high electrolytes. Use a cooling towel. If experiencing the following, seek help: confusion, vomiting, dizziness. It's not great to leave the hive open in the middle of an inspection, but if it's necessary, you can cover the top of the hive with a towel or something just to block some of the light out, and then give yourself a chance to sit down and rest and take a break. But the idea with hive inspection is the less time that you keep it open, the better for the bees. So like you said, preventive measures, use just to recap, buddy system, protective clothing, modify for safety, and keep emergency contacts handy. Some of the things you can do for remote beekeeping safety, keep a fully stocked first aid kit, phone, GPS, or emergency beacon charged and ready. Someone knows your location and schedule. Wear your protective gear, have your hydration with you, and then keep an emergency plan printed and accessible for everybody at the apiary that's with you. So current availability of accessibility in the beekeeping community, AgriAbility I thought Apiability. um, with NC State, online beekeeping communities, nonprofits, there's grants. The current issue is there's limited resources for accessible beekeeping, so that's part of the purpose of this grant and this 501(c)(3) is one of the things that I had noticed coming into it was a lot of the nonprofits were geared towards veterans, and it kind of left out some of the general public. So I didn't want to jump on that, train of, you know, applying for grants for just, helping veterans. So I include veterans in with also the general public. So limited availability, lack of awareness. People don't know what you need until they know. So the more vocal you are about what your are and what you could utilize will also help. And then financial barriers are another challenge that people have in accessibility. So this is future improvements for inclusive beekeeping. Increased collaboration with disability advocacy groups, collaboration with university students to develop accessible solutions, increased education in accessible beekeeping, and then integration of technology. Example is the Be My Hive Inspector application that I'm developing to aid visually impaired and new beekeepers during hive inspections. It is a work in progress and a labor of love. But it's coming, as you can see here, it's actually able to detect the queen out of a frame or a live stream of video. So the model is always getting better, and I'm always training it with new pictures and updating the software. So hopefully this will be more widely available to everyone that would like to use it. When they need it, it can do things like the brood, the capped honey, the capped brood, varroa mites, things like that. So it's not perfect, it's still in beta, but it is coming. Another thing that I'm working on is this website that will actually allow you to load up pictures or videos and do the inference, as you can see in the bottom right photo. And then, I want to make it so that because right now the current workflow is I have to grab the pictures, draw the box around what I'm saying is in the picture, and then I have to retrain the model. So I'm trying to streamline that where people could actually upload the images and annotate them themselves, and then I can retrain the model, and that model will be available to iOS and Android and web, as soon as those new photos are added to the training. So assessing a person's limitations and suggesting adaptations. Step one, identify physical and cognitive limitations. Step two, matching adaptations to specific needs. And step three, testing and adjusting those adaptations. So we're going to go into the meat of this in the last 15 minutes. Step one, identify physical and cognitive limitations. So these are the questions that you want to ask yourself whenever you go out to their apiary or their property when they tell you are interested in incorporating beekeeping into their agriculture. Mobility. Can the individual move freely around the apiary? Are they able to stand, kneel, or reach hives comfortably? Strength and endurance. Can they lift and manipulate hive components, or do they require assistance? So this is where strength and endurance is where you would look more into the buddy system, and mobility could affect how close you put hives together or what type of hive that you actually utilize. Dexterity, do they have sufficient hand function to use beekeeping tools and manage hive inspections? Just because they don't have the hand dexterity does not mean that they can't be a beekeeper. It might mean that they have to use a glove that it can actually lock the hive tool into their hand so that they're not using their hand strength to manipulate the tool, but more of their arm. Um, Sensory processing, are they sensitive to touch, sounds, or unexpected environment stimuli? The last thing that you want to do is have somebody have a nervous breakdown. So, kind of get an idea of what overstimulates them, and they may not know because people may not know what the being around, 10,000 bees will do until you're around them. Cognitive functioning, can they follow a structured beekeeping routine? Can they follow instructions easily? Can they make decisions and be able to follow through with those decisions? Step two, matching adaptations to specific needs, mobility. Use horizontal hives to eliminate the need for lifting heavy supers. Install raised hive stands to allow access from a seated position. Create a wheelchair accessible apiary path using compacted gravel or pavers. Um, which one you choose depends on if it's a manual or electric wheelchair. Utilize mechanical hive lifters, whether it's electric and does it itself, or if it's or the one with the, oh, geez, I can't think of the word. The thing that you rotate to lift it up, the crane. Matching adaptations for strength and endurance. Use lighter hive components such as medium or shallow boxes. Um, so if you don't know anything about Langstroth, there's actually different sizes. They have, 8 frame and 10 frame. They have boxes that are deep, medium, and shallow. So you can actually lighten the load based on the size of the box that you choose. Work in shorter time intervals, take breaks between tasks to conserve energy. Part of that is planning, like if they have 5 hives, they don't need to do every hive in one day. They can spread it out over multiple weeks and and then they can partner with a beekeeping assistant or mentor to share responsibilities. And then again, utilize 8 frame over 10 frame equipment for easier management. Talking about its dexterity, select ergonomic hive tools with larger cushioned grips to accommodate limited hand function. Use frame grips for easy handling of hive frames and utilize automated honey extractors to minimize manual labor during harvesting. A lot of, I don't know how North Carolina does it, but a lot of state beekeeper associations in Virginia and in Florida that actually have honey extractors that you can rent out from your local organization, utilize it, extract your honey, and then return it. So, that is a resource. The people around you are also a resource. Visual, you can apply tactile markers on hive components so you can distinguish between different hives and different sections. Use voice recording apps to document hive inspections instead of written logs. Work with a sighted beekeeping assistant to verify hive health and queen activity. This kind of goes back into why my Be My Hive Inspector app started to be developed because there was actually a blind beekeeper in California that was beekeeping and then she lost her eyesight and got out of it and she wanted to get back into it. And what her work for like inspection flow was she would go out. She couldn't wear gloves because once she lost her sight, her hands were basically her eyes. So she had to, touch the frame. She would feel the different raises and the brood and capped honey, so she would be able to tell that. And then she would use the accessibility features on the iPhone to take pictures. She would send it to a sighted beekeeper, and the sighted beekeeper would say, "Hey, you have this here and that there." So she's been working with me to develop this application and test it because she can actually hold up her phone and use her camera feed and actually reads back to her like, "Hey, there's pollen, there's brood, there's that kind of stuff." So that's kind of what you can do with somebody who has a visual impairment. Cognitive, implement structured beekeeping checklists to guide each hive inspection. If an issue is memory or attention, one of the things you could do is type out each step and then have it in a piece of paper that's laminated, take it out there, and then if they get stuck or get lost, they have something that they can go back to refer to ground themselves. Utilize digital reminders and mobile apps to track your hive tasks and feeding schedules. reduce sensory overload by using noise canceling earmuffs and softer gloves to, minimize excessive tactile stimuli. How do you test and adjust these adaptations? Once you've seen them, you've analyzed their limitations, you've made you've made recommendations. Now it's time for them to put them into place and test them. So we need to assess adaptations, and it is essential to continue success. If problems persist, you can consult professionals such as occupational therapists or assistive technology professionals, and that can actually help you adapt further than what is a standard accessible options now. And how should you look at your adjustments and base them off of ease of use? Does the modification reduce physical strain or improve efficiency? Safety, does it lower the risk of injury, bee stings, or equipment mishandling? Effectiveness, does the adaptation help the individual perform the necessary beekeeping tasks with greater independence? And then environmental considerations, does the modification work well in different weather conditions and seasonal changes? So we'll just go over a few. Okay, so some of the beekeeping with limitations, common problems and solutions. I'll have sorry, McKayla send out this talk along with her stuff if she doesn't mind. So you can also go through this, but we'll go through a couple on each slide. If it's difficulty lifting heavy hive boxes, you can use horizontal hives. If it's a difficulty maneuvering around an apiary with uneven terrain, establish an apiary with wide flat paths made of gravel. Keep hives at an ergonomic height for easy access from a seated position. Visual, if it's identifying brood patterns, queen cells, or signs of disease, you can use high contrast hive markings, voice activated hive tools. If there's an increased risk of accidental contact with bees, implement touch-based guides on hive components, such as raised markers, textured handles. Um, if it is somebody that has low vision, then they can wear gloves that reinforce sensory, but you don't want to, but most people with vision loss would find it difficult to wear gloves and get out of beekeeping what they need. If it's a hearing, inability to hear hive sounds that might indicate queen presence or swarming activity. They have hive monitoring technology such as cameras, vibration center sensors, um, apps that provide real-time notifications. If it's difficulty communicating with other beekeepers during inspections, think about providing notebooks or whiteboards, text-to-speech apps to facilitate communication in noisier environments. For cognitive, if they have difficulty maintaining a consistent routine, use reminders app, automated calendars, or work with a beekeeping mentor to develop structured schedules. If it's sensory overload, you can use noise canceling earmuffs. If you're forgetting hive management tasks, use digital tracking apps or pieces of paper that are laminated. If it's chronic pain, fatigue, and autoimmune, limited endurance for hive inspections and maintenance, use lightweight hive tools, schedule tasks in short increments, and work with a beekeeping partner. If it's increased pain or fatigue from lifting those hive components, you can utilize hive stands to reduce bending, install mechanical lifts. So there are, all these options such as use ergonomic hive tools, use weighted gloves for hand tremors, invest in automatic hive lifters if they have hand and dexterity limitations. Kind of going along with not all disabilities are just physical. Some of them may be in your, I don't want to say in your head, that's horrible, but some of them might be, such as PTSD or anxiety. So stress or panic caused by bee proximity or unexpected stings, begin with small hive management tasks. Wear extra clothing. Uh, if they get discomfort in unpredictable beekeeping situations, establish a structured approach, work in familiar settings, and have a designated exit strategy, which is always important because anything can go wrong. So make sure you always have a way to step away. Um, so
So, Justin, I want to be wary of time. We only got 4 minutes. We got a bunch of questions that I'd like to ask. I think you're at the appendix here, so we're wrapping up.
yeah, we can
Um,
go ahead and ask. Sorry.
but that's all right. But thanks so much for that. So, very quickly, what are the pros and cons of the different hive designs that you just went over as far as overwintering honeybees?
So they the long laying, the lay-ins, they are because they're larger. I mean, they're because they go. How do I say this? Heat rises. So in my experience, the longer the hive is, the less resources the bees will have to use. And this I could be wrong. It could just be my experience, but heat in a laying straw that's stacked. The heat is going to rise, so you need to have that insulation. A layers hive that has the deeper frames, they actually provide insulation underneath the outside wood. So in the colder climates, um, for regular Langstroth, you could do things such as, wrap it.
Mhm.
And depending on how cold you are, I don't know what you guys do in North Carolina to handle cold weather or
No, we don't do anything. But I agree with you that the stove piping tends to be better for winter than the horizontal. Another question, do you think the long Langstroth is the best option for somebody who's trying to transition out of a regular Langstroth hive to minimize lifting the heavy boxes, so going horizontal versus vertical?
yes. So the beauty about the long laying is it is the exact same measurements of the Langstroth box. It's just
Yeah,
horizontal rather than stacking. So you can use the same equipment. You can build it. You would have to get somebody to build the hive, but you wouldn't have to rebuy frames. You wouldn't have to rebuy tools and anything like that. So if you need an intermediate from, like if you've already tried the medium boxes and things like that, then yes, I would say long lane would be the best one.
great.
Top our hive is going to be a whole new learning system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. There was quite a bit of excitement of people about your app, the Be My Hive Inspector app. But there was a comment saying that the links on your website suggest that there's a limited number of slots to help with the beta testing. So is that true, or is there ways that others might be able to participate in your app development?
There is a limit, but I'm growing that. So when I get the list of all the attendees, I will send out instructions for people to be able to test, and it might be in the next week or so.
Okay,
I'm going to update it and make sure everything is right, and then add everybody's list and send everybody's name and send out an email.
excellent, excellent. Thank you. And then final question from Sean is going into the spring, have you already made your, like, how much forethought do you have to do on this? It sounds like there's quite a bit. And then a corollary to that is what's your kind of hidden diamond or your diamond in the rough when it comes to books that might be helpful in this area?
I'm not. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't really read much. I spend too much time looking at the computer screen for work and stuff. I don't really want to read outside of that. So, YouTube is a great way. Just make sure that there's multiple people that are going to give you multiple things of advice. So when you get information from YouTube, just make sure that you take it with, how do I say, common sense a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't go to one person and follow their way the whole way, you know, because there are some people out there that, kind of do like a cult following. They have that one person and they do everything that one person does.
Hmm.
You know, every video that you watch, make sure you use it to as not the rule, but as a way to find out more information of what you can research.
Excellent. Great advice. Well, again, thanks so much. We're right at time. I want to thank you, Justin, for your presentation, your expertise in this area, as well as Catherine and Michaela from the Agromedicine Institute. I think this was 2 hours very well spent. As I mentioned, we're going to try and put this on our YouTube channel. So go to ncsuapiculture.net and you'll find a link there to our YouTube channel where hopefully we'll have this recording and additional information. So thanks everybody. Thanks for spending your lunchtime with us and have a great time.